The first thing you notice when a memory begins to rot is the silence. It's not a peaceful quiet, but a thick, velvety hush that swallows sound whole, a vacuum where laughter used to be. For me, that silence has a name and an address: 1313, Laurel Lane, the Harper house. Even now, a decade after that last, fateful Halloween, if I close my eyes, I can still feel the ghost of that silence clinging to my skin, cold and final. It's a story I've never told in full, not to the police who filed the report, not to the therapists who suggested I was traumatized, not to my own family who saw the light in my eyes dim. But some stories fester if left untold, and the truth of Ellen Grove is a poison that needs to be purged. I grew up on those pristine, tree-lined streets. Ellen Grove wasn't just a neighborhood, it was a perfectly curated diorama of suburban bliss. Every lawn was a flawless emerald carpet, every picket fence stood at militant attention, and the cherry blossom trees lining the sidewalks shed their pink petals each spring like a benevolent, blushing snow. But the true heart of our community, its pulsating, joyful core, beat not on the 4th of July or Christmas, but on Halloween. And the epicenter of that heartbeat was always the Harpers. Arthur and Eleanor Harper were the kindly, eccentric grandparents the whole street adopted. He was a retired engineer with a workshop full of wonders. She was a retired art teacher with a seemingly endless supply of glitter and goodwill. Together, they crafted magic. Their Halloween display wasn't just a few pumpkins and cardboard skeletons, it was a full-scale, immersive theatrical production. Sonic witches stirred cauldrons that bubbled with dry ice fog, their cackles synchronized with the flickering orange light strung from the gables. A cemetery sprouted from their front lawn, each tombstone bearing a punny epitaph for a long-gone pet. A ghostly hologram of a weeping widow would drift past an upstairs window. And at the center of it all, welcoming you up the path, was Arthur himself, often dressed as a magnificent, clockwork-powered Frankenstein's monster, his movements jerky and precise, handing out full-sized candy bars and warm, genuine smiles. The year I turned 12, I was finally deemed old enough to go trick-or-treating with my friends, unsupervised. My costume was a labor of love, a mummy. Wrapped in what felt like a mile of my mother's best cheesecloth, stained with tea bags for an authentic, aged look. The air was crisp, carrying the scents of burning leaves, melted chocolate, and the peculiar, metallic tang of autumn. The streets were a riot of joyful chaos. Superheroes chased vampires, princesses compared their loot, and the night was alive with shrieks of laughter that were just a hair's breadth away from genuine terror. It was perfect. We saved the Harper house for last, the grand finale of our candy pilgrimage. As we turned on to Laurel Lane, a wave of anticipation swept through our group. But it broke against a shore of nothing. The Harper house was dark, not just unlit, but a profound, light-swallowing darkness. The elaborate graveyard was there, but the tombstones were just gray slabs, inert and somber. The cauldron was cold and empty. No fog rolled across the lawn. No cackles pierced the air. The hologram window was just a dark pane of glass. The house itself seemed to hunch in on itself, its windows like sightless eyes. A cluster of other costumed children milled about on the sidewalk, their voices hushed and confused. Maybe they're sick. My friend Liam, a pirate, suggested. Maybe they ran out of candy, said Chloe, a fairy, her lower lip trembling, but I knew, with a certainty that chilled my blood despite the warm night, that it was more than that. This wasn't an absence of celebration, it was an absence of life. The house didn't feel temporarily vacant. It felt abandoned. Forsaken. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. I watched as a group of older kids, their bravado fueled by the night, marched up to the porch. One of them, a lanky zombie, pressed the doorbell. We all heard the familiar, cheerful chime echo inside, a sound that was horribly out of place. It was followed by a silence so deep and complete it felt like a physical blow. No shadow shifted behind the door's frosted glass. No floorboard creaked. The zombie kid shrugged, trying to play it cool, but we all saw the unease in his eyes as he retreated back to the safety of the sidewalk. I should have left. Every instinct, every primal nerve in my 12-year-old body was screaming at me to run. But something else, a deeper, more morbid curiosity, rooted me to the spot. I felt drawn to the porch, to that silent, dark door. "Don't," Chloe whispered, grabbing my frayed cheesecloth sleeve. I shook her off. "I'll just knock. Really loud. Maybe they're in the back and can't hear." It was a flimsy lie, but I clung to it as I walked up the path. Each step on the leaf-strewn pavement sounded thunderously loud. The air grew colder the closer I got, the festive sounds of the neighborhood fading into a distant, muffled hum. The porch felt like a separate world, a stage waiting for a tragedy to begin. I raised my hand, my heart hammering against my ribs, and knocked 3 times, solid, firm raps that echoed in the hollow stillness beyond. The silence that followed was alive. It pressed in on my eardrums, a heavy, waiting presence. I held my breath, listening so hard I could hear the blood pulsing in my own head. And then, I heard it. Not from the door, but from the side of the house, a soft, wet, dragging sound. Like something heavy, wrapped in a sodden rug, being pulled across the grass. My blood ran cold. I stumbled back from the door, my mummy wrap suddenly feeling like a shroud. I didn't look toward the sound. I didn't dare. I turned and ran, my friends scattering with me, our perfect Halloween night irrevocably shattered. The days that followed were a study in slow-burning unease. The initial childhood excitement over Candy Mountains faded, replaced by whispered questions in school hallways. Where were the Harpers? The adults, at first, were dismissive. They'd gone on a last-minute trip to visit a sick relative. They were tired and had turned in early. The rational explanations were trotted out like well-worn furniture, but the house remained dark. The decorations, once so vibrant, began to sag and decay under the relentless autumn rains. A storm blew a witch from a tree, and it lay broken on the lawn, its pointed hat askew, its plastic face staring blankly at the sky. No one came out to fix it. The lawn, once immaculate, grew shaggy and wild. The cheerful yellow paint of the house seemed to fade, graying under the perpetually overcast sky. The neighborhood's veneer of perfection began to crack. Mrs. Gable across the street claimed her dog would howl at the Harper house every night at exactly 3:07 a.m., something it had never done before. Old Mr. Henderson, who lived 2 doors down, swore he saw a light flicker in an upstairs window one night, a cold, blue light that moved erratically before vanishing. He called the police, who did a perfunctory walk around the property, shone a flashlight at the front door, and declared everything secure. They left, but the stain of their visit remained. My own life became consumed by the mystery. I spent hours sitting at my bedroom window, which had a direct, albeit distant, view of the Harper house. I started a journal, scribbling down everything I saw and heard. The pattern of the weather, it always seemed gloomier over their roof, the behavior of the animals, birds avoided the trees in their yard, the time the streetlight in front of their house inexplicably went out. My parents were worried, chalking it up to an overactive imagination fueled by a scary night. They tried to distract me with board games and movie nights, but my attention was always pulled back to that dark spot on Laurel Lane. Weeks bled into a month. The Thanksgiving decorations went up on other houses, plastic turkeys and cornucopias, but 1313, Laurel Lane remained a Halloween tomb, a stark, decaying monument to the night everything changed. The community's attitude shifted from concern to a superstitious avoidance. Parents now told their children to walk on the other side of the street. The Harper's name was spoken in hushed tones, if at all. The day the police finally came for a formal welfare check was a gray, drizzling Tuesday. I was homesick from school, watching from my window as two officers, a weary-looking veteran and a younger, more eager one, approached the house. They knocked, called out, and, receiving no answer, the veteran cop produced a key from a lockbox near the door. My breath hitched. This was it. We would have answers. They disappeared inside. I watched the windows, expecting to see shadows moving, lights flipping on. But the house remained dark and still. They were inside for nearly an hour. When they emerged, their body language was all wrong. There was no urgency, no shock, no grim determination. They just looked confused. The veteran cop scratched his head, looked back at the house, and then got on his radio. The official statement was a masterpiece of bureaucratic nothingness. There were no signs of forced entry. No evidence of a struggle. The house was clean, almost unnaturally so. A half-drunk cup of tea sat on the kitchen counter, now home to a grotesque, fuzzy mold. The Harpers' wallets, keys, and Arthur's beloved vintage Cadillac were all present. Their suitcases were in the closet, their clothes neatly folded in drawers. It was as if Arthur and Eleanor Harper had simply paused in the middle of their lives and been deleted from existence. The case went cold. The house was sealed, a pending investigation notice slapped on the door. The neighborhood tried to move on, but the shadow of the Harper house had fallen over all of us. Halloween was canceled the following year. There were no decorations, no trick-or-treaters. The streets of Ellen Grove were as dark and silent as the house on Laurel Lane. But I couldn't move on. The mystery had become a part of me. That soft, wet, dragging sound I'd heard on the porch was a constant echo in my nightmares. I was 17 now, and the rational part of my brain tried to dismiss it as a raccoon, a stray dog with a sack of garbage. But the child in me knew better. One October afternoon, driven by an obsession I no longer fought, I decided to confront the past. I waited until the street was empty, the sky a bruised purple with impending twilight. I slipped through the gap in the overgrown hedges and into the Harpers' backyard. The air was frigid and still. The swing set Arthur had built for his grandchildren, who visited every summer, was now a skeleton of rust, creaking forlornly in the breeze. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I was trespassing, but the compulsion was too strong. I needed to see. I peered through a crack in the wooden slats of the back porch, into the kitchen window. I could see the dusty counter, the moldy cup. And then my eyes were drawn to the floor. There, leading from the kitchen into the dark hallway, was a trail. It was faint, almost cleaned away, but visible if you knew what to look for, a series of dark, irregular smudges. The color of old wine, or dried blood. And in the center of the kitchen floor, someone had drawn something. It wasn't made of paint or chalk, it looked like it had been scoured into the linoleum with something sharp. A symbol. A circle, containing a weeping eye, with a single, spiraling line piercing the pupil. It was a symbol of profound sorrow, of a gateway, of a watchful, weeping horror. I didn't know how I knew its meaning, but I felt it in my soul, a cold, absolute certainty. I stumbled back, my vision swimming. The dragging sound hadn't been something being taken out. It had been something being taken in. The Harpers hadn't vanished. They had been claimed. Consumed. The house wasn't just empty, it was a larder. A nest. I am 22 now. I moved away from Ellen Grove for college, but I could never truly escape its pull. I studied folklore, mythology, and paranormal phenomena, trying to find an explanation for what happened. I found the symbol in a digitized copy of a forbidden medieval grimoire. It was the mark of a lingering one, a psychic parasite that feeds on joy, on memory, on the very essence of a life well lived. It attaches itself to a place of great happiness, and when that happiness is at its peak, during a celebration, a moment of pure love, it strikes, devouring the inhabitants and storing their residual life force within its dwelling, savoring it for decades. The house itself becomes its shell. Its body, and its stomach. This Halloween, I've returned. I stand across the street from 1313 Laurel Lane. The neighborhood has tried to reclaim some of its old spirit. A few houses have decorations. I see a small group of trick-or-treaters, shepherded by nervous parents who give the Harper house a wide, fearful berth. They think it's just a haunted house. They have no idea how right they are. The new family, the Wilsons, moved in last spring. They were outsiders, drawn by the cheap price of a stigmatized property. They laughed off the local legends. They painted the house a cheerful blue, fixed the lawn, and threw a massive Halloween party tonight to make new memories. Through the window, I can see them laughing, dancing, the house blazing with light and music. They have no idea they are dancing in the belly of the beast. As I watch, the party inside seems to reach a fever pitch. I see Mark Wilson raise a glass in a toast, his face flushed with joy. And then, it happens, all the lights in the house die at once. Not a flicker, but an instantaneous, total extinction. The music cuts off mid-beat. The laughter turns into shouts of surprise, then confusion, then, as the seconds stretch, into something else. Into fear. From my vantage point, I see it clearly. The windows, which should be black, are not. A deep, pulsating, crimson light begins to glow from within, illuminating the rooms with a hellish radiance. It throbs like a diseased heart. And then the screaming starts. Not playful shrieks, but raw, primal, terror-filled screams that are brutally cut short, one by one. I don't move. I can't. I just stand there, frozen, as I was at 12 years old. The front door swings open silently. From the crimson-lit interior, a figure stumbles out. It's Sarah Wilson, her party dress torn, her face a mask of unimaginable horror. She takes 2 steps onto the lawn, gasping for air, and then she stops. Her body goes rigid. She turns slowly, against her own will, to look back into the house. Her mouth opens in a silent scream, and then she is yanked back inside with impossible force, the door slamming shut behind her. The crimson light pulses, once, twice, and then winks out. Silence. The deep, velvety, all-consuming silence of a sated predator. The streetlights on Laurel Lane flicker and die, the other houses on the street suddenly go dark, as if the very life is being drained from the neighborhood. The cherry blossom trees, bare for winter, seem to clutch at the sky with skeletal, pleading fingers. I finally force myself to turn and walk away. My hands are trembling, my face wet with tears I didn't know I was shedding. The Harpers weren't the first, and the Wilsons won't be the last. The thing in the house is patient. It can wait, it has all the time in the world. Halloween in Ellen Grove is over forever. The haunting has only just begun. And I am the only one who knows that the monster isn't inside the house. The house is the monster. And it's always, always hungry.